Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Explorer, your quiet passage through the night, where wonder drifts in slowly and questions take their time, arriving like soft ripples on still water. Tonight, our gaze rests once again on the moon, always present, always faithful. Its pale light has followed humanity through every age. But look closely, not just at its glow, but at its place. Suspended in the sky at a distance so exact, so improbable, it begins to feel less like chance and more like a riddle. Too far away, and its pull on Earth would fade, leaving oceans quiet, climates unstable, life perhaps impossible. Too close, and chaos would reign, tides swallowing coasts, storms unending, days thrown into disarray. Yet somehow it rests exactly where it needs to be. There is something haunting about that precision, because in all the wide solar system, no other planet holds a moon so strangely suited, so perfectly scaled, that it can blot out the sun in a flawless eclipse, aligning two cosmic bodies across impossible space. It is as if the moon is not merely orbiting us, but performing for us, revealing a balance that feels too neat, too perfect to be ignored. Scientists debate, of course, collisions, captures, fragments of Earth flung upward in ancient fire, yet none of these theories explain everything. And so the whispers begin. Perhaps the moon was placed, not born. Perhaps it is not simply a neighbour, but a construct, a work of design rather than chance. As you settle into the calm of this night, let your thoughts wander with me. We'll drift between science and story, between logic and possibility. Not racing toward answers, but strolling gently through mysteries, because the moon itself seems to invite that kind of quiet wonder. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? What time glows on your clock? Share it in the comments if you'd like. It always feels as though we're scattered stars ourselves, forming a constellation across the Earth. And if this gentle voyage brings you a little calm, feel free to like or subscribe, not as a task, but as a way of helping this small ship of curiosity sail further into the digital night. So let us set out together now, into the strange precision of our lunar companion, and into the possibility that its perfection is no accident at all. When you step outside on a clear night, the first thing your eyes find is often the moon. It doesn't demand attention like the sun, and it doesn't scatter into countless points like the stars. Instead, it hangs there, singular and steady, a glowing disk that feels close enough to touch, yet far enough to remain untouchable. For as long as humans have looked up, the moon has been more than a rock in orbit. It has been presence itself. Think for a moment of all the generations before you, who tilted their heads to that same glow. Long before telescopes or spacecraft, even before written language, the moon was already our companion. It was a clock when no clocks existed, its waxing and waning teaching us the rhythm of time. It was a lantern for night travellers, a guide across seas and deserts, and it was a mirror, too, reflecting not only sunlight, but our own imaginations. Civilizations gave it names, faces, personalities. To the Greeks it was Selene, gliding her silver chariot across the heavens. In Japan it was Tsukuyomi, a moon god of mystery and order. In Africa, some stories say the moon was once the sun's equal, before being cast away for shining too brightly. Across continents, the moon became everything from lover to judge, guardian to trickster. Every culture, in its own way, saw something of itself in that pale face. But beyond myth, the moon shaped the fabric of life itself. Its gravitational pull stirred the oceans, lifting tides that influenced the cycles of fish and the migrations of birds. Some scientists even suggest that without tidal pools, cradled by lunar rhythms, life might never have crawled from the sea onto land. In that sense, every step you take, every breath you draw, may owe something to that distant companion. Pause with that thought. The moon, steady and patient, has been sculpting the story of Earth all along, yet we rarely question it. Its presence feels as natural as breathing, as permanent as mountains. But permanence can be deceptive. The moon is drifting away from us slowly, at about the rate your fingernails grow. Millions of years from now, eclipses will no longer occur as we know them. The perfection we experience today is temporary, a balance caught in a fleeting moment of cosmic time. And so, when we call the moon a mirror in the sky, it reflects not only myths and memories, but also our fragility. It reminds us that what feels eternal may be precarious, and what looks ordinary may, on closer glance, be extraordinary. Tonight, as we begin our journey, let this silver mirror be our starting point. We'll move gently from its familiar face into the stranger questions hiding beneath. For if the moon is both companion and enigma, perhaps its place in the sky is not coincidence at all, but a clue, waiting quietly for us to notice. Imagine standing thousands of years ago in a desert, long before cities glowed at night. The air is still, the silence nearly absolute. Above you stretches a sky full of stars, but it is the moon that dominates the horizon, brighter than any fire, steadier than any torch. You would not see it as just rock and dust, because how could you? To ancient eyes it was alive, purposeful, intentional. Every stage of its cycle carried meaning. A new moon whispered of beginnings, a full moon promised abundance. Farmers planted by it, priests scheduled rituals around it, lovers met under its glow. To look up was to feel woven into something larger, a pattern that links sky and soil, heart and harvest. The moon was not passive background, it was the rhythm keeper of human life. Even in literature, it became a shorthand for emotion. Poets spoke of longing under moonlight, of sorrow framed in silver beams. Philosophers compared the moon's borrowed glow to the human soul, reflecting divine light. For travellers across oceans, the moon and stars were not romantic flourishes but survival. By charting its course, navigators steered their ships, trusting that this celestial clock would never betray them. And yet, the moon was not always comforting. It could unsettle. Its face seemed to watch, unblinking, through nights of war or solitude. Its shifting phases suggested instability, change, even danger. In some cultures, eclipses were feared as omens of doom, the temporary disappearance of a protector. To others, the moon's paleness was a sign of death, a reminder that light itself could fade. It is fascinating how one object could embody both sanctuary and threat, and perhaps that duality is why it never loosened its grip on human imagination. Now, let us shift from myth to a more intimate truth. The moon's presence has been constant for every person who ever lived. Think about that. No matter when you were born, whether in the age of pyramids or skyscrapers, the same moon shone overhead. It lit the paths of hunters on the savannah. It glowed above crowded medieval markets. It rose over battlefields, and it hovers tonight outside your window. In a universe defined by change, the moon feels like a thread of continuity binding every human story into one. But constancy can conceal strangeness. The more we studied the moon, the more unsettling details emerged. Its size, relative to Earth, is unusual. No other planet in the solar system has a satellite so disproportionately large compared to its host. Its orbit, slightly tilted and oddly stretched, defies some expectations of stability. Even the fact that it rotates at just the right speed to show us only one face forever, that perfect synchrony makes astronomers pause. Coincidences, perhaps, but coincidences stacked so neatly they feel almost choreographed. As you let these thoughts drift through your mind, notice how the moon changes character depending on how you approach it. To a child, it is a nightlight in the sky. To a farmer, it is a calendar. To a scientist, it is a puzzle. And to those who lean toward mystery, it may even be a signal, a crafted companion, not a random accident. Whether or not you accept such speculation, the moon's role as our silver mirror cannot be denied. It reflects not only sunlight but also our questions, our fears, and our yearning for connection. It is both familiar and strange, ordinary and miraculous. And perhaps that is why, in every era, we return to it searching not just for light, but for meaning. Picture the moon not as a distant object, but as a companion walking silently beside you. It does not hurry, it does not speak, and yet its presence alters the way you feel the night. That companionship has been so steady that most of us rarely stop to ask, why is it there at all? The Earth could have existed without such a partner. Many planets do. Mercury and Venus are lonely wanderers circling the sun without any moon at all. Mars has two tiny companions, no larger than lumpy rocks. Jupiter and Saturn are surrounded by swarms of satellites, dozens of irregular bodies whirling in chaotic dances. But Earth is different. We have one moon, not too small, not too large, not too close, not too far, a Goldilocks companion, balanced just so. From this perspective, the moon is not merely familiar, it is suspiciously perfect. Its size is large enough to stabilize Earth's tilt, keeping our seasons from spinning into wild extremes. Its distance is just right to pull the oceans into breathing tides, nurturing ecosystems that shaped the course of evolution. Its presence ensures that nights are never fully dark, that humans could gather, hunt, and dream even after the sun slipped below the horizon. You can almost sense a pattern in all this, as if the moon has been fulfilling roles rather than merely existing. A cosmic guardian, a regulator, a lantern. And whether you see these roles as natural consequences or something more, the fact remains, without this satellite, life as we know it might not exist at all. There is something humbling in realizing that your very heartbeat may depend on the rhythm of a body 384,000 kilometers away. The moon is both ordinary and miraculous ordinary because we see it every night. Miraculous because its influence seeps into every corner of life on Earth. And when you recognize that, the moon's glow feels less like reflected sunlight and more like a subtle promise that even in the vastness of space, we are not entirely alone. But this comfort comes with an undercurrent of unease. The moon's perfection, its size, its distance, its role begins to resemble intention rather than accident. It is like finding a key that fits too many locks, a coincidence repeated until it no longer feels random. For some, that thought is unsettling. For others, it is thrilling. Because if the moon's place is not chance, then it may be evidence of a deeper story, one hidden in plain sight above our heads. As you let your thoughts drift over this idea, consider how the moon has always mirrored human imagination. When people feared the gods, the moon became a divine face. When they longed for love, it became a silent witness. And now, in an age of science and technology, it becomes a question of origin, perhaps even of design. The moon continues to play the role we cast upon it, evolving as our own understanding evolves. The moon is both our oldest companion and our strangest riddle. It has been a mirror, a clock, a guardian, and maybe, just maybe, a clue that life on Earth has been shaped by forces we have yet to fully understand. Take a breath with that thought. Hold it gently, like moonlight on your palm, because in the next step of our journey, we'll look more closely at this so-called perfection, at the uncanny balance of distance and size that makes our moon unlike any other. And as we do, the question will linger. Is this truly coincidence? Or is there a hidden hand behind the silver mirror in our sky? To understand the moon, we must return to the beginning, not the beginning of humanity, not even the beginning of Earth as we know it, but a time when the young solar system was still raw and violent. Imagine the sky not as the calm dome we see tonight, but as a battlefield of worlds in the making. Planets were colliding, fragments were scattering, and chaos reigned in a way our settled universe no longer reveals. Out of this crucible of fire and collision, the moon's story is said to begin. The leading explanation is called the giant impact hypothesis. In this scenario, Earth was still young, a molten sphere barely cooled, when it encountered a colossal intruder, a body roughly the size of Mars, which scientists have named Theia. The collision was cataclysmic. Mountains vaporized in an instant, oceans of magma splashed into space, and the impact reshaped both worlds. It was not merely a crash, it was creation by destruction. Debris from the impact spiraled outward, a glowing ring of molten rock encircling the Earth. Over time, this fiery halo began to gather, clumps colliding, fragments merging, until a single body coalesced. That body became the moon. Unlike the myths that see the moon as a goddess placed in the sky, this theory paints it as a child of violence, Earth's offspring, born from chaos. The evidence seems compelling. Lunar rocks brought back by the Apollo missions bear striking similarities to Earth's mantle. Their isotopic fingerprints, the subtle ratios of elements within them are nearly identical, suggesting a common origin. If the moon had been captured or co-formed separately, its chemistry should differ. Instead, it carries Earth's essence, as though torn from our body and remade in orbit. This theory also explains why the moon is so large compared to Earth. A smaller collision might have left behind only dust or scattered fragments. But a collision with a body the size of Theia could plausibly throw enough material into space to form a substantial satellite. It also helps account for the moon's tilted orbit and peculiar rotation echoes of the violence that shaped it. Yet even within this best explanation, uncertainties linger. Simulations of such an impact often fail to reproduce the exact properties we see today. Too much material falls back to Earth, or the resulting moon ends up with a composition that doesn't quite match reality. The details resist perfect alignment, as if the story is almost right but missing a final stroke. And so, the giant impact remains both the most accepted and the most questioned of theories, a grand attempt to tame the moon's strangeness, and yet one that leaves enough gaps for mystery to slip through. When the Apollo astronauts bent down on the lunar surface and scooped up handfuls of grey dust and stone, they were not only taking souvenirs, they were gathering the most precious clues to the moon's past. These samples, locked away in laboratories on Earth, became time capsules from 4.5 billion years ago. What they revealed astonished scientists. The moon and Earth share almost the same isotopic fingerprint. This fingerprint refers to the ratios of oxygen isotopes, tiny variations in atoms that act like a planetary DNA test. Every body in the solar system seems to have its own distinct signature, shaped by where and how it formed. Mars is different from Earth, asteroids different still. But the moon? Its oxygen isotopes match ours almost exactly, as though it were carved from Earth's own mantle. For many, this was the smoking gun, evidence that the moon was not a captured stranger but our own child, born of a violent impact. Computer models give further support. In simulations, a Mars-sized body collides with the young Earth, blasting molten rock into orbit. Over thousands of years, that material clumps and cools into the moon we know. The models explain why the moon is so poor in volatile elements, the substances that easily evaporate. They would have been boiled away in the heat of impact, leaving behind the dry, airless body we see today. And yet, despite its strengths, the giant impact theory refuses to sit comfortably. Many simulations produce moons with the wrong chemistry. If Theia were a separate body, its composition should show up in the moon, but lunar rocks do not reveal a clear second signature. Instead, they look almost entirely Earth-like, as if Theia's identity vanished. Some researchers suggest Theia must have been compositionally identical to Earth, an extraordinary coincidence in itself. Others argue the mixing during impact was far more complete than models predict, erasing Theia's fingerprint. Either way, the neatness of the match feels uncanny. Other puzzles persist. The moon's orbit, while roughly circular today, must have evolved from something messier. How exactly did it settle into its current tilted plane? Why does it spin in perfect lockstep with Earth's rotation, showing only one face? Theories can explain these features in broad strokes, but the details resist. Every time a new simulation closes one gap, another opens, as if the moon itself refuses to surrender its secrets entirely. And then there are the echoes of Apollo's seismic experiments. When modules were deliberately crashed into the lunar surface, the moon rang for hours, its vibrations travelling farther and longer than expected. Scientists explained it as a result of its dry, fractured geology, but to many ears, it sounded strange, almost artificial. The phrase, "the moon rang like a bell," caught fire in headlines, and though geologists clarified the meaning, the imagery lingered. It fed into the feeling that the moon is not only peculiar in its origin, but uncanny in its nature. So the giant impact hypothesis stands in an odd place. It is the theory most accepted, the one that gathers the most evidence, yet it feels like a story with missing pages. It paints the moon as a child of violence, but its details leave a shadow of doubt, a whisper of something more deliberate, and in that whisper, speculation grows. For many in the scientific community, the giant impact hypothesis is the best explanation. We have a grand narrative of fire and violence that accounts for more than any other theory could. It tells us that the moon is not a wanderer caught by chance, nor a twin formed side by side, but a scar of our own past, Earth reshaped, reborn in orbit. It is a story of survival, of creation carved out of destruction, and it has a poetic symmetry that appeals even to the most skeptical minds. But the poetry only goes so far. In conference halls and research papers, scientists still argue over the details. Was Theia real? And if so, where did it go? Why does the moon bear so little trace of anything beyond Earth itself? How could one impact create such a perfectly tuned companion, one large enough to stabilize our tilt, distant enough to balance tides, positioned enough to create eclipses? The giant impact answers many questions, but it also creates new ones, like a riddle that solves itself only by deepening the puzzle. And this is perhaps the heart of the unease. Even our best story leaves the moon looking strangely deliberate. The odds of such an impact producing such a satellite, at just the right distance, with just the right influence, feel slim. Computer models strain to reproduce the exact outcome. The chemistry feels too neat, the proportions too perfect. Each time we polish the theory, its shine reflects back not certainty, but curiosity. For dreamers and skeptics alike, this gap between evidence and explanation is where imagination blooms. If the giant impact is true, then the moon is a child of chance, born from chaos. But if it is not the whole truth, if something more lurks behind the neat fingerprints and the uncanny precision, then the moon may be more than accident. It may be message. It may be design. Science continues to search, refining models, probing rocks, sending new spacecraft. Yet the mystery remains suspended in the night sky, glowing softly, inviting wonder. And so, as we leave behind the tale of the giant impact, we step into a deeper layer of the riddle, the unanswered mysteries, the details that science cannot yet smooth away. For in those details lies the space where speculation takes root, and where whispers of an artificial origin grow louder. Even with the giant impact theory standing tall as the mainstream explanation, the moon remains cloaked in puzzles that resist resolution. It is as though, each time science draws the curtain back, another shadow waits behind. These unanswered mysteries form the heart of the moon's strangeness, details too persistent to ignore, too inconvenient to dismiss. One of the first puzzles lies in its density. Compared to Earth, the moon is oddly light. Its average density is about 3.3 grams per cubic centimetre, significantly less than Earth's 5.5. This suggests it lacks a large iron core, which most planets and moons of its size tend to have. For a body formed in the fiery chaos of impact, one might expect it to hold a heavy, molten heart. Instead, it is strangely hollow-seeming, as though built differently from its peers. Apollo's seismic readings reinforce this impression. When the moon trembled from impacts, its vibrations lasted far longer than expected, ringing through its body like a bell. Scientists explain this as the result of a bone-dry, fractured crust, but the description never quite lost its echo of mystery. Then, there is its orbit. The moon does not circle neatly along Earth's equator, as one might predict from a close natural formation. Instead, its path is tilted about 5 degrees relative to the plane in which Earth travels around the Sunday. It also drifts in a slightly stretched ellipse rather than a perfect circle. These quirks may seem minor, but they are profound to astronomers. They hint at a history more complex than a single neat collision, a past with layers still unexplained. And of course, there is the enigma that poets, scientists, and dreamers alike return to again and again: the far side. Tidal locking ensures that only one hemisphere of the moon faces us, always. The other side, hidden from human eyes for millennia, was not revealed until Soviet spacecraft sent back grainy photographs in 1959. What those images showed was shocking, a landscape utterly unlike the familiar man-in-the-moon face. The far side is pockmarked with craters, rugged and mountainous, lacking the wide, dark seas of lava that dominate the near side. 2 worlds on one body, split by mystery. Why such asymmetry? Why would one half be smooth and the other so scarred? Theories abound, but none settle the question fully. Each of these anomalies, the density, the orbit, the two-faced character, would be intriguing on its own. Together, They paint a portrait of a satellite that resists easy classification. The moon is not a simple companion. It is a riddle in orbit, reflecting our own uncertainty back at us. And so, even as science refines its models, the unanswered questions remain suspended in the night sky. They are not failures of knowledge, but invitations to wonder, to speculate, and perhaps to consider possibilities we have not yet dared to imagine. Stand beneath the night sky for a moment, and picture the moon as you know it, familiar, calm, patterned with its dark maria and pale highlands. Then imagine flipping it over like a coin. The hidden side, long shielded from human eyes, bears almost no resemblance to the face we grew up with. Where the near side is dotted with wide, dark plains, seas of cooled lava, where ancient impacts once filled, giant basins, the far side is rugged, scarred, and stubbornly mountainous. Scientists have struggled to explain this asymmetry. One idea suggests that tidal heating on the Earth-facing side once kept it warmer, allowing massive impacts to melt and spread, forming the smooth seas we see. The far side, colder and stiffer, never softened. Another idea points to the moon's crust itself, which is significantly thicker on the far side, resisting lava flows. But these theories are patchwork. They explain parts of the picture, not the whole. Why should one hemisphere be thicker or colder than the other in the first place? The moon keeps its reasons close. Then there is the puzzle of its interior. Data from seismometers, Grail gravity mapping, and more recent lunar orbiters reveal that the moon is not a simple solid body. It may have a small iron core, yes, but much smaller than expected. Surrounding it are layers that transmit seismic waves in ways unlike Earth. When struck, the moon vibrates long and strangely, its tremors echoing as though through a structure that is both rigid and fractured. This has led some researchers to describe it as an onion of anomalies, each layer hinting at a past we do not fully understand. And while the moon's orbit is often described as stable, it is also peculiar. Not only is it tilted, but its long-term evolution does not align perfectly with models. Simulations of how a body should behave after a giant impact rarely produce an orbit that matches what we see today. Some astrophysicists propose additional interactions, perhaps with other proto-moons, now long gone, to explain the tilt and eccentricity. In other words, the moon may have had siblings, temporary companions shattered or absorbed, leaving only this one survivor. Modern missions have only deepened the riddle. NASA's Grail spacecraft mapped the lunar gravity field in exquisite detail, revealing vast structures beneath the crust. Buried impact basins, hidden mass concentrations known as mascons, and scars invisible from the surface. These mascons puzzle scientists. They are gravitational anomalies so strong that they once disrupted spacecraft orbits, dragging probes down toward the surface. Why they exist, and why they are clustered where they are, remains an open question. Taken together, these findings blur the neat storylines. A body too light, orbiting oddly, showing two radically different faces, hiding scars beneath its skin that warp the paths of spacecraft. It is not the picture of a simple satellite, born cleanly from collision. It is the picture of something more complicated, layered with secrets. And in this complexity, the human imagination finds fuel. Some see evidence of hidden geology. Others see evidence of something far stranger, hints that the moon is less a natural body and more a crafted one, deliberately shaped, its anomalies not accidents but signatures. The more closely you examine the moon, the more it seems to resist simple answers. Each anomaly could, perhaps, be explained on its own. A low density? Maybe the iron core was stripped away in the early impact. A tilted orbit? Perhaps a leftover of chaotic interactions long ago. A scarred far side? Differences in crust, thickness, and temperature could account for it. Yet when you stand back and view them together, the picture feels unsettled. It is like listening to a symphony where every instrument plays the right notes individually, but the harmony is just slightly off enough to make you wonder if something else is conducting. Even the far side, revealed only in the last century, deepens the sense of strangeness. For millennia, humans assumed the hidden face must mirror the one we knew. When the first photographs came back from Luna 3 inches 1,959, the shock was immediate. a world of scars, utterly alien compared to the moon we thought we understood. The realization that we had lived our entire history, seeing only half the truth, resonated far beyond astronomy. It became metaphor, myth, even philosophy, the idea that what we take for granted may be only a mask, hiding something radically different just out of sight. Astronauts who walked on the lunar surface described the experience as surreal. The ground was grey, the sky black, the horizon strangely close, and always there was silence, a silence so complete that it seemed to seep into the bones. Standing there, they reported feeling both awe and unease, as though the moon were both stage and secret. The samples they carried home gave us data, but the experience they carried home gave us questions. And so the moon remains a paradox, familiar, constant, reassuring yet also unsettling, peculiar, and unfinished. It stabilizes Earth's tilt, nurtures tides, inspires our stories, but its very perfection, its very usefulness, makes it feel less like a random leftover of creation and more like something chosen. A body that not only exists, but exists here, now, in just the right way to shape life. Science continues to probe, mapping, measuring, simulating, and yet the mysteries linger. Density, orbit, asymmetry, mascons, each clue whispers that the moon's story may be stranger than our theories allow, and into that gap between explanation and anomaly, speculation inevitably flows. Because if the moon is too peculiar to be dismissed, too perfect to be chance, then another question rises naturally, almost irresistibly. What if it was not born at all? What if instead it was built? Up to now, we have walked in the realm of science, collisions, chemistry, orbits, densities. But just beyond those careful boundaries lies another landscape, one filled with speculation, whispers, and bold claims that science itself often refuses to entertain. In this landscape, the moon is not simply a companion carved by chance. It is something far more radical, a construction, a work of cosmic engineering deliberately placed in orbit above our heads. This artificial hypothesis is not new. For decades, fringe researchers, writers, and even a handful of academics have wondered aloud whether the moon's peculiarities might point to something intentional. They argue that the moon is too perfect, too useful, too improbably placed to be a natural accident. Instead, they suggest it was built either hollowed out or assembled by forces or beings far beyond our understanding. In 1970, Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov published an article in Sputnik magazine that shocked many readers. They proposed that the moon was not a natural satellite at all, but a hollowed-out planetoid transformed into a kind of spacecraft by an ancient intelligence. Their argument drew on many of the mysteries we have already explored: the moon's low density, its seismic ringing, its gravitational anomalies. To them, these were not quirks of geology, but signatures of design. They pointed to the mascons, the mass concentrations hidden beneath the lunar surface, as evidence of massive internal structures, perhaps reinforcing shells or chambers. They noted how the moon's crust is thicker on the far side, almost as though armoured against impacts. They even speculated that the vast craters, which should have been deeper given the size of impacts, often appear shallow, as if something harder, stronger, lurks just beneath the dust, preventing meteors from burrowing further. For many scientists, these ideas were fantastical, lacking the rigorous evidence that theory demands. But for others, they were tantalizing. If the moon is artificial, it changes everything. It would mean humanity has lived under the watch of a structure, not a satellite, for all of history. It would mean that the sky itself contains a message, or perhaps a machine left behind by a civilization far older than our own. Even outside of academic journals, writers and theorists seized upon the idea. Books were published describing the moon as an observatory, a spaceship, even a cosmic ark carrying unknown purposes. Ancient myths about the time before the moon were reinterpreted as memories of its arrival, deliberate placement in Earth's orbit. Theories that once seemed like fantasy found fuel in the very anomalies science struggled to explain. And whether one accepts these ideas or not, they possess a strange power. To look up at the moon and imagine it hollow or designed is to feel the ground shift beneath your certainty. It transforms the familiar into the uncanny. It takes what seems ordinary, the light outside your window, the silver disk in the sky, and recasts it as something otherworldly. Once the seed of the artificial hypothesis was planted, it grew in unexpected places, in the pages of speculative books, in late-night radio shows, in conferences where mainstream scientists rarely dared to tread. Again and again, the same anomalies were gathered, reinterpreted not as flaws in our knowledge but as clues to a grander design. Writers like Don Wilson in the 1970 Seconds popularized the idea in works such as Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon, where he collected every oddity: the shallow craters, the ringing vibrations, the perfectly matched eclipses, the peculiar orbit. To Wilson and others, these were not coincidences, but signatures, fingerprints of intelligence left in plain sight. The moon was portrayed less as a barren rock and more as a vast artifact, a hollow shell wrapped in stone and dust to disguise its true nature. Later authors layered on even bolder speculations. Some argued the moon was an ancient observatory, placed deliberately to monitor Earth. Its locked rotation, always showing one face, made it an eternal one-way mirror, watching without being watched. Others suggested it was a timekeeper, its cycles carefully tuned to regulate tides and seasons, ensuring Earth's climate stayed stable enough for life to flourish. In this view, the moon was not an accident, but a component of a larger system, as though Earth itself had been terraformed, engineered to host life, with the moon as part of its design. Ancient myths, too, were re-examined through this lens. Stories from Greek and Mesoamerican traditions speak of a time before the moon, when the night sky was different. Some legends describe gods or heroes bringing the moon into place. To those who favour the artificial hypothesis, these are not mere stories but faint cultural memories of an event humanity has forgotten: the deliberate installation of the moon. Even some scientists, while careful not to claim artificiality outright, have used language that fuels curiosity. Phrases like "too neat," "oddly perfect," unlike any other, appear in academic papers. To conspiracy theorists, these words are almost admissions, subtle acknowledgements that the moon doesn't quite belong in the natural order. The evidence, of course, is circumstantial, stitched together from fragments of geology, myth, and mathematics. But it thrives in the cracks left behind by mainstream science. Where orbital models stumble, speculation steps in. Where chemistry feels too neat, imagination expands the possibilities. The artificial hypothesis becomes not just an explanation, but a story, one that transforms the moon from passive companion to active enigma. And perhaps that is why the idea continues to resonate. When you look at the moon with this thought in mind, it feels different. Its light seems less neutral, more watchful. Its silence less empty, more secretive. Whether or not it is true, the notion reshapes the way we see the night sky. It makes us participants in a mystery, as though we are living under a lantern hung not by chance but by choice. What makes the artificial hypothesis so enduring is not that it has proof in the strict scientific sense, but that it thrives in the space between facts, the gaps, the inconsistencies, the peculiarities that no model has yet closed. For those who entertain it, the moon is not simply odd, it is too odd, like a riddle written deliberately to invite curiosity. Supporters of this view often return to the question of purpose. If the moon is artificial, then why was it placed here? The answers vary, coloured by imagination. Some claim it is an ancient ark, carrying life or knowledge across the galaxy, left in orbit as a kind of seed bank or vault. Others picture it as a monitoring station, watching Earth's evolution, quietly transmitting data to someone, somewhere. Still others suggest it is part of a larger system, a stabilizer deliberately installed to shape Earth into a cradle for intelligent life. Theories stretch even further. Some writers wonder if the moon itself might not be empty, but inhabited its hollow caverns serving as corridors or hangars. They speculate that UFOs occasionally seen darting near the lunar surface are not visitors from afar, but residents stepping briefly into the open before returning to their hidden base. These are not claims supported by mainstream science, yet they persist, repeated in books, documentaries, and late-night conversations that linger on the edge of sleep. What gives these ideas their strange power is not their certainty but their suggestion. The moon becomes more than rock and dust. It becomes a mirror for our deepest suspicions, that we are not alone, that the universe is not indifferent, that perhaps we are part of a story larger than ourselves. Whether true or not, the artificial hypothesis reshapes the moon from a passive satellite into an active participant, a character in humanity's cosmic drama. And perhaps that is why the idea is so difficult to dismiss completely. Even skeptics admit to a flicker of wonder when they contemplate the moon's perfection, its precise size, its exact distance, its strange usefulness. To some, these are coincidences. To others, they are signatures. Either way, the question refuses to vanish. Imagine, for a moment, that the moon was not born from Earth at all. Imagine it drifting through the early solar system, a wanderer among countless fragments of rock and half-formed planets. In this vision, Earth did not create the moon, it caught it. Gravity reached out like a hand, seized the drifter, and set it spinning around us. This idea, known as the capture hypothesis, was once seriously considered by astronomers. It explains some things neatly. The moon's odd orbit, its tilt, its peculiar behavior compared to other satellites. A body from elsewhere might well carry anomalies, but capturing a moon is no easy feat. For Earth to hold onto a body as massive as the moon, without it crashing down or flying away, would require extraordinary conditions. The odds are so slim that many scientists abandoned the theory in favor of the giant impact. Yet in the shadow of speculation, the capture idea took on a different flavor. What if the capture was not an accident? What if, instead, it was an act? In this version, the moon was not merely snagged by Earth's gravity, but placed into orbit adjusted, slowed, stabilized. To some, this is the only explanation for its eerie perfection, its exact distance, its precise role in balancing tides and seasons, its uncanny ability to produce eclipses. Supporters of this placement hypothesis point to how delicate the arrangement truly island, move the moon slightly farther, and eclipses vanish, tides weaken, Earth's tilt wobbles. Move it slightly closer, and chaos reigns, floods, quakes, destruction. Only here, at its current distance, does life flourish. To them, the precision feels less like luck and more like calibration, as though the moon were a machine set into place to regulate Earth. Ancient myths of a world before the moon are sometimes woven into this narrative. If cultures remembered a darker sky, then perhaps they were recalling in symbolic form a time before the moon was captured or positioned. The arrival of the moon in those stories becomes less myth and more memory, passed down across millennia until it blurred into legend. Of course, mainstream science resists this leap. To astronomers, capture is improbable, placement even more so. But in the eyes of those who lean into the mystery, improbability is not impossibility. If a wandering world could be drawn into orbit by accident, then perhaps, just perhaps, it could also be guided deliberately. To imagine the moon being placed in orbit is to imagine one of the most audacious feats of engineering the cosmos could offer. Yet those who favour the idea often point out that the arrangement looks suspiciously engineered already. The moon is not simply nearby, it sits at the exact distance to cover the sun's disk during eclipses. It is not simply massive, it is large enough to stabilize Earth's tilt. It is not simply companion, it is regulator, calendar, lantern, and guardian all at once. Variations of the placement hypothesis stretch across the speculative spectrum. Some suggest the moon was once a wandering body, captured by Earth but nudged into a perfect orbit by unknown hands, perhaps stabilized through subtle adjustments over eons. Others take a bolder stance, that the moon is not natural at all, but a manufactured object, inserted, fully formed into its role. In both cases, the claim is the same. The moon's current orbit is not an accident but a decision. Those who argue in favour often return to the difficulty of natural capture. In the early solar system, planets and protoplanets collided constantly. Yes, but for Earth to seize a body as large as the moon cleanly, without it slamming into the surface or slingshotting away, would require a precise set of conditions, a braking mechanism, some argue, would have been necessary. Gas drag, multiple body interactions, or tidal effects are possibilities in natural models, but none quite satisfy. The result feels less like chaos and more like choreography. For mainstream astronomers, such speculation crosses the line from science into storytelling. They admit that capture is unlikely, but not impossible. The Moon's isotopic similarity to Earth strongly suggests a shared origin, lending more weight to the giant impact than to capture. And yet, even as they dismiss deliberate placement, the unease remains. Words like improbable and uncanny keep appearing in papers, as if scientists themselves cannot quite ignore the perfection of the outcome. Placement advocates see this as an opening. If chance alone struggles to explain the Moon's exact orbit, then perhaps intention is worth considering. They often compare it to stumbling across a stone balanced on its edge. You could argue that wind or erosion left it that way, but you cannot help but suspect a hand placed it there. The Moon, they say, is that stone balanced too perfectly to ignore, and so the capture and placement hypothesis lingers, not in academic journals but in the margins of conversation, in the imaginations of writers, and in the late-night musings of those who stare at the sky and sense something deliberate. It is not proof, but suggestion, and suggestion, when repeated across centuries, can be as enduring as evidence. If the capture hypothesis alone feels improbable, the placement hypothesis pushes imagination further still. To suggest the Moon was deliberately guided into orbit is to suggest intention on a cosmic scale, a concept that unsettles even those who enjoy speculation, and yet, the peculiarities of the Moon keep the idea alive. It is not just that the Moon is nearby. It is nearby in precisely the right way, doing precisely the right things, as if it were tuned for Earth's benefit. Advocates of this view often point out how fragile the balance truly island. Shift the Moon only slightly in distance, and the consequences cascade. Tides weaken or overwhelm, eclipses vanish, Earth's axial tilt grows unstable. The cradle that nurtures life would wobble, and the long story of evolution might never unfold as it has. To them, this is not coincidence. It is calibration, as though Earth were part of a larger system, its survival safeguarded by a silent guardian in orbit. Some even argue that myths of a time before the Moon might encode a memory of its placement, an event so extraordinary that ancient peoples preserved it in story. The Zulu tale of brothers rolling the Moon into the sky, the Sumerian accounts of the gods assigning paths to celestial bodies, the Akkadian claim of being before the Moon, each could be seen as cultural fragments of a shared observation. The Moon was not always there, and then it was. Of course, science remains cautious. No telescope has revealed signs of construction, no probe has uncovered machinery beneath the dust. The Moon looks like rock, acts like rock, and carries the chemistry of rock. To call it artificial is to step beyond evidence, but the unease lingers precisely because the arrangement is so perfect. Natural explanations feel stretched, artificial ones feel too bold. Between the two lies the mystery, unresolved and compelling. And so, the capture and placement idea persists at the edge of thought. It may never become mainstream science, but it continues to live in whispers, in speculation, in the quiet wonder of those who look up at the Moon and sense something more. If the Moon is not a mere accident of nature, if its precision and perfection suggest design, then the question that hangs in the night sky is as vast as it is unsettling. Who built it? To ask this is to step beyond geology, beyond physics, into the realm of imagination and speculation. And yet, the idea refuses to vanish. For centuries, whispers of builders, watchers, and ancient intelligences have shadowed humanity's gaze at the Moon. Some imagine that the architects were a civilization far older than our own, a people or perhaps a species who rose to heights of engineering we can barely conceive. They picture star-faring beings who could shape worlds the way we shape cities, who could move planets as easily as we move stones. To them, the Moon is not a random companion but a monument, a cosmic artifact deliberately positioned to nurture life on Earth. In this vision, the Moon becomes part of a larger design. Earth is not simply lucky, but chosen. The tides, the seasons, the eclipses, all calibrated by hands or minds beyond our comprehension. Just as humans build greenhouses to shelter fragile plants, perhaps someone built the Earth-Moon system to shelter fragile life, ensuring it would not be lost in the chaos of the cosmos. Others speculate more cautiously. They do not see the moon as entirely artificial, but as modified a natural body hollowed out, reinforced, adjusted. A captured planetoid reshaped into a regulator, a silent machine wrapped in stone. If so, then the builders were engineers on a scale beyond anything we know, capable of working not with steel and concrete, but with worlds themselves. And then there are those who wonder if the moon is not a relic of the past, but part of a continuing story. If it was placed here deliberately, then perhaps it is more than stabilizer and timekeeper. Perhaps it is also a watchtower, a listening post, an observation deck from which someone somewhere has always been watching. The one face it shows us, always the same, becomes in this interpretation not a quirk of tidal locking but a kind of mirror, a mask, hiding its true side from view. Mainstream science, of course, rejects these notions. To many, the idea of extraterrestrial engineers is not explanation but fantasy. And yet, speculation continues to bloom precisely because the moon is so peculiar. It is not proof that draws these ideas forward, but suggestion, the sense that something about our sky is too neat, too deliberate, too extraordinary to be chance. When you look at the moon with this in mind, it changes. It ceases to be a dead rock and becomes a riddle, a lantern not only lighting Earth but raising questions far larger than Earth itself. When people let their thoughts drift toward the possibility of lunar architects, several visions arise, each more fantastic than the last. They are not certainties, but stories, frameworks, by which the human mind tries to grasp the unthinkable. One scenario imagines the ancient cosmic architects. These beings, whoever they were, belonged to an era long before Earth bore life. Perhaps they roamed the galaxy in search of planets suited for cultivation, scanning for candidates like gardeners seeking soil. Upon finding Earth young, chaotic, but promising, they installed the moon as stabilizer, regulator, and shield. In this story, the moon is not only companion but tool, the scaffolding upon which life was encouraged to bloom. Humanity is not the intended outcome, but a consequence of careful calibration. Another vision portrays the moon as a watchtower. Instead of nurturing life, its purpose is surveillance. Hollowed chambers within its body, metallic layers beneath its crust, and mascons acting as stabilizers could all, in this speculative lens, be interpreted as machinery. From this perspective, the moon has always been more than rock. It has been an instrument. Its tidal lock, showing Earth only one face, becomes a perfect disguise, ensuring its hidden side could harbor observation posts forever unseen. If this story is true, then we have never been alone. We have been observed, silently, for as long as we have looked upward. A third possibility imagines the moon as a relic. Perhaps its builders are gone, their civilization collapsed or moved on. What remains is the artifact itself, a machine now abandoned, still orbiting, still functioning long after its creators disappeared. Like a derelict satellite still circling Earth, the moon may be a remnant, its purpose forgotten, its systems dormant, its secrets buried. If so, we are the inheritors of their legacy, living under the shadow of something we do not yet understand. These scenarios, though wildly different, share a common thread: intention. They suggest the moon is not an accident but an act, not a coincidence but a choice. And within that suggestion lies a profound shift in how we might view ourselves. If the moon is engineered, then humanity's place in the cosmos changes from solitary accident to part of a larger design. Of course, the skeptical voice remains strong. No probes have found machinery, no seismic readings reveal hollow corridors, no telescopes detect artificial signals. The moon presents itself as dust and stone. But speculation thrives not on certainty, but on the spaces between data. The bell-like ringing, the shallow craters, the myths of arrival, each becomes a thread woven into the tapestry of possibility. And in that tapestry, one question glows like a star. If someone did build the moon, then what does that make Earth? A garden? A laboratory? A cradle carefully protected until its children learn to look up and ask why. Speculation about extraterrestrial builders inevitably stirs both awe and unease. If such beings existed, their abilities would surpass ours by a gulf as wide as the ocean surpasses a pond. We move stones. They, in this vision, moved worlds. And yet, the evidence we hold is not blueprints or machines, but hints, strange densities, uncanny alignments, myths of placement. These fragments leave us with possibilities rather than proofs, and with possibilities come deeper questions. One question is why. If someone or something engineered the moon, what purpose did it serve? Was it a gift, a gesture of benevolence to stabilize Earth and allow life to thrive? Was it an experiment, a long-running study of how life develops under carefully tuned conditions? Or was it something more self-serving, a resource depot, a disguised vessel, a monument left behind by travelers whose motives we may never grasp? Another question is when. Did this intervention occur before life began, seeding conditions for biology to emerge? Or was it later, as civilizations arose, ensuring stability for culture to flourish? If myths of a time before the moon carry even a shadow of truth, perhaps humanity itself witnessed its placement, though filtered through the fog of prehistory, leaving us only symbols and stories. And still another question is who? Were they an ancient alien species whose reach spanned the stars? Were they connected to the very origins of humanity, guiding us subtly from above? Or are we imagining intention where there is only coincidence, writing stories into the sky because we cannot resist the urge to find pattern and purpose? In the end, the speculation itself becomes the story. The moon, as a stabilizer, as a timekeeper, as a watchtower, as a relic, each vision reframes our relationship with the cosmos. Each asks us to consider that we may not be alone, and that our place in the universe might be less accidental than we thought. Science, of course, urges caution. Evidence must precede conclusion. But imagination urges wonder, and wonder is its own kind of evidence. Evidence that the moon, whatever it is, continues to move us not just physically, but philosophically. And it is here that our journey naturally drifts next. For if the moon truly were artificial, if it were built, placed, or designed, then the implications stretch far beyond astronomy. They touch our identity, our origins, our sense of meaning. To imagine the moon as artifact is to imagine ourselves as part of a larger story, one in which humanity is not the author, but the character. If the moon has always felt like a companion, its role as a performer is even more astonishing. Among all the coincidences written into the sky, one stands out as almost too perfect to believe. When you lift your eyes to the heavens during a solar eclipse, you witness a spectacle so precise, so unlikely, that it borders on the miraculous. The moon, hundreds of times smaller than the sun, passing in front of it in such exact proportion that it hides its blazing face completely. For a few fleeting minutes, the day turns to night, stars awaken, and a glowing corona unfurls around a blackened disk. It is one of the rarest alignments in all of nature, and it happens because of an extraordinary coincidence of size and distance. The sun is about 400 times wider than the moon, but it is also about 400 times farther away. The ratios cancel out almost perfectly, leaving both bodies to appear nearly the same size from Earth's surface. This delicate balancing act allows the moon to cover the sun in a way no other planet's satellite can replicate. Jupiter's moons, enormous though they are, never blot out their star in quite the same way. Mars's tiny companions, Phobos and Deimos, cast only small shadows, incapable of painting the sky with darkness. But Earth, out of billions of possible worlds, sits in just the right place, with just the right moon, to stage this cosmic drama. Think of the improbability of this. The sun is a star 1,000,000 times the volume of Earth. The moon is a fragment of stone compared to it. Yet, through geometry and chance, they line up in the human sky as equals two circles dancing in symmetry. Some astronomers call it a cosmic accident. Others admit that the term accident feels too shallow for something so rare. If the moon were just a little smaller, or a little farther, total eclipses would never happen. We would live in a universe without that moment, when the sun becomes a ring of fire. And without eclipses, human culture would have been very different. For ancient civilizations, eclipses were terrifying and divine. Imagine standing in a crowded marketplace 2,000 years ago as the sky suddenly dimmed, animals fell silent, and the sun's light was eaten by a black disk. To those watching, it was not geometry. It was gods at war, omens of disaster, cosmic signs written in fire. Kings consulted priests, armies paused in awe, farmers knelt in fear. In cultures from China to the Americas, eclipses were woven into mythology as battles between dragons and sky serpents, struggles between light and shadow. The moon, by covering the sun so perfectly, became both villain and saviour in humanity's imagination. Even today, when science explains every detail of orbital mechanics, eclipses stir something primal. Millions travel across the globe to stand under the shadow of totality, chasing a phenomenon that lasts mere minutes. They describe it not in equations, but in emotions, a shiver in the spine, a tightening of the chest, a feeling of being present at an ancient ritual written into the cosmos itself. In those moments, you do not think of ratios and distances. You think of how improbable it is that your world allows such a thing at all. And this improbability raises the deeper question: why here? Why now? Why us? The moon is slowly drifting away. Millions of years in the future, it will no longer perfectly cover the Sunday. Total eclipses are a temporary gift, a window in cosmic time. Humanity just happens to exist during the narrow slice of history when this alignment is possible. Some call it luck. Others whisper that luck alone cannot explain such precision. Consider the geometry again, but this time, slow it down. The sun is 1.4 million kilometers across. The moon is just 3,474 kilometers across. By every ordinary measure, one should dwarf the other into irrelevance. And yet, because of their distances from Earth, they paint the sky with equal strokes. When the moon passes in front of the sun, it does not look comically small, nor does it smother the sun entirely. It matches it, almost edge for edge, like two coins held at arm's length. This is not a universal rule of nature. It is an earthly oddity, and it exists only here, only now. Scientists have long pointed out how fragile this balance really is. The moon is receding from Earth at about 3.8 centimeters per year. That sounds tiny, but over millions of years it transforms the sky. In the deep past, the moon loomed larger. Eclipses lasted longer. The sun's corona was hidden for broader stretches of time. In the far future, the moon will shrink to a smaller disk, never quite covering the sun again. Humanity, in other words, is living in the golden age of eclipses, a cosmic season that will end, leaving no witnesses to remember it. This timing alone unsettles many thinkers. Out of billions of years in the history of Earth, we just happen to exist when the moon and sun are so perfectly matched. It feels like watching a play where the stage, the actors, and the audience have been set with impossible precision. If life had arisen earlier, the moon would have been too large, later, too small. But it is now in our age, in our lifetimes, that the spectacle is at its most precise. The odds press against coincidence, and so speculation grows. Some whisper that this balance is not just coincidence, but clue that the moon's placement might be deliberate, as though positioned to draw our eyes skyward, to make us ask questions we would not otherwise ask. In this view, eclipses are not merely celestial accidents, but invitations. The universe, or something beyond it, left a signature in our sky, a riddle written in shadow and light. Even without such speculation, eclipses shaped human thought in profound ways. For astronomers of ancient China and Babylon, they were cosmic data points, used to measure time and predict celestial cycles. Eclipses helped refine calendars, guided empires, and slowly unfolded the mathematics of the heavens. In Greece, philosophers began to realize that if a shadow could be predicted, then perhaps the universe was not chaos, but order. The very idea that nature was law-governed, that geometry ruled the heavens, was nurtured under the shadow of eclipses. This is why total eclipses are more than spectacles. They are thresholds. They press us to feel and to think at the same time. The sudden chill of the air, the eerie stillness of birds, the shock of seeing stars at midday, these are visceral reminders of our smallness. Yet at the same time, the predictability of it all, down to the minute, reveals the hidden harmony of the cosmos. Fear and wonder fuse into awe. And maybe that is the greatest paradox. Eclipses remind us that we live in a universe both precise and mysterious. They are evidence of natural law, and yet they feel staged. They comfort us with predictability, and yet they unsettle us with beauty too exact to ignore. The moon, in this role, becomes not just a mirror but a mask, hiding the sun while hinting at secrets still veiled. Stand for a moment in the shadow of totality. The world grows hushed, the temperature dips, and a strange twilight spreads across the land. Around you, people gasp or fall silent, staring upward with the same awe their ancestors felt millennia ago. The moon has stepped perfectly into place, turning the sun into a black void ringed by fire. For a few minutes, you are reminded that the universe is not just something you live inside. It is something that performs, with stages and curtains, scenes and silences. This sense of theatre is hard to shake. Why should the geometry align so flawlessly that the moon and sun appear the same size? Why should humanity emerge in the exact window of cosmic time when such a spectacle is possible? And why should that alignment not only exist but also stir the deepest layers of our imagination? It is as if the universe itself wanted to be noticed, wanted to leave us a puzzle shimmering in the sky. Scientists, of course, will remind us that coincidences happen and that our minds are tuned to find patterns where none may exist. Yet even within science, eclipses remain oddly generative. They have tested Einstein's theory of relativity, revealed the structure of the sun's atmosphere, and inspired centuries of astronomical calculation. Out of coincidence has come discovery. Out of shadow has come light. But for those who lean toward mystery, the alignment whispers something more. If the moon were placed, if its distance were chosen, then eclipses are not accidents at all. They are signals proof written not in stone tablets or ancient texts, but in the sky itself. Each eclipse becomes a reminder. This world is shaped by something that knows we are watching. Whether you hold to science or speculation, there is no denying the emotional truth. Eclipses connect us to the cosmos in a way few other events can. They reduce the sun, our mighty star, to a fragile ring. They elevate the moon, our quiet companion, to center stage. And they reveal us tiny beings on a small world, caught between light and shadow, trying to make sense of both. As the last sliver of sunlight returns and the day resumes, you are left with a memory that feels larger than life, as if you had witnessed not only a celestial event, but also a cosmic performance. And in that memory, a question lingers. Is this theatre merely nature's coincidence, or is it choreography, planned and purposeful? Hold that thought gently, because it carries us toward the next step of our journey. If the moon's current position creates such impossible beauty, then what would happen if it were just a little closer or a little farther? Would Earth still be habitable? Would life still exist as we know it? To answer that, we'll drift next into the fragile balance of distance and what it means for a world like ours. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the moon drifting away, just a little more than it already does each year. Picture it shrinking in the sky, no longer a commanding lantern but a faint coin of light. At first it seems harmless, a quieter moon, a subtler presence. But in truth, distance changes everything. The moon's pull on Earth is not decorative, it is fundamental. To push it farther away is to unravel threads woven into the very fabric of life. Start with the tides. Today, the moon pulls at our oceans with a rhythm that feels eternal. Waves rising and falling, coasts breathing in and out. If the moon were farther, its grip would weaken. Tides would shrink. The vast intertidal zones, those coastal regions where life thrives in cycles of wet and dry, would dwindle. These zones are often called the cradles of evolution, places where early organisms experimented with land and sea. Without strong tides, perhaps those experiments would never have succeeded. In a moonless distance, life on Earth might still be waiting in the shallows, never quite bold enough to crawl ashore. But it doesn't stop at biology. Our planet's spin, its very orientation, depends on the moon's presence. Earth tilts on its axis at about 23.5 degrees, a tilt that creates seasons. But that tilt is not perfectly stable. Left alone, Earth would wobble chaotically, swaying like a top slowing down. Winters could last centuries, summers could vanish, climates could shift violently. The moon acts as a stabilizer, its gravity calming Earth's wobble, keeping the rhythm of seasons gentle enough for agriculture, migration, and civilization. Push the moon farther away, and its stabilizing hand weakens. Earth's seasons might tilt into chaos, painting the world in extremes too wild for stability. Astronomers have run the simulations. They show a lonely Earth, its spin shifting unpredictably, its climate veering into ice ages and fiery droughts without warning. Continents frozen for centuries, then scorched, species unable to adapt quickly enough. Human civilizations, if they could rise at all, forced into endless cycles of collapse and survival. Without the moon's steadying influence, Earth becomes less a home and more a roulette wheel of climates. Even the sky would feel different. Eclipses would vanish, of course, the moon too small and too distant to ever cover the sun again. Nights would lose their anchor, stars would dominate, but the moon's guiding face would be gone. For millennia, humans navigated by its phases. Without it, our calendars would fracture. We would still have the sun, but we would lose the quiet heartbeat of months, the measure that once bound us to natural rhythms. Civilization itself might have unfolded differently, less tied to cycles, more adrift. So, when we imagine the moon drifting away, we are not imagining a simple aesthetic change. We are imagining the unraveling of life's foundation. A gentler tide, a chaotic tilt, a fractured sky the world would still turn, but it would not be the same world we know. And in that vision, the moon's current position begins to feel less like chance and more like providence. It sits not too far, not too near, but in the delicate middle ground that allows stability, life, and meaning to flourish. Think again of the sky in this imagined world, a moon so distant that it shrinks into insignificance. It would no longer command poetry, nor anchor the night with its glow. Children would look up and see only a pale speck, not a face, not a presence, but a faint stone wandering in the dark. Myths would never have been born in the same way. The goddesses and gods of the moon, Artemis, Chang'e, Sin, Tsukuyomi, might never have existed. Humanity's imagination itself would have been poorer, less inspired, less tied to that silent companion. Our calendars too would be broken. For most of human history, months were lunar months. Crops were planted with the full moon, rituals timed with its phases. Without a prominent moon, civilizations might have struggled to agree on cycles of time. Perhaps calendars would be based only on the sun, long and unwieldy, disconnected from the subtler rhythms of the natural world. The shared experience of watching the same bright moon wax and wane across cultures might never have united us. Humanity might have remained more fragmented, each society measuring time by its own stars, its own improvisations, its own local skies. And there is something else to consider, the psychological presence of the moon. Across centuries, it has been a comfort in darkness, a familiar lantern above fields, mountains, and oceans. Sailors trusted it, poets courted it, dreamers whispered to it. Without its reassuring glow, nights would be deeper, darker, more frightening. The balance between light and dark would tilt toward shadow, and perhaps our minds would tilt with it. Would art be more fearful, literature more haunted? Would humanity's relationship with the night have been less tender, more wary? On the level of ecosystems, weaker tides would ripple outward into unexpected consequences. Migratory patterns of animals that depend on tidal cues would falter. Coral reefs, synchronized with lunar cycles, might fail to bloom in harmony, unraveling entire chains of marine life. Fisheries that sustained coastal peoples for millennia might never flourish. Humanity's path to survival would have been narrower, harder, more precarious. The moon's retreat would echo not only in the sky, but in the stomachs of families and the survival of cultures. Even geology whispers of the moon's importance. With weaker tides, Earth's rotation would gradually shift. The length of days would change over eons, altering the balance between day and night. Sleep patterns, biological rhythms, plant cycles, all might drift into unfamiliar patterns. The gentle balance that allows forests to breathe carbon, animals to migrate, and humans to sow and harvest would wobble. A farther moon means an Earth less synchronized, less musical, less harmonious. And still, the most unsettling thought may be this: if the moon were much farther away, would we ever notice how strange our world had become? Would we, in that alternate history, accept a harsher planet as normal, never realizing what we had lost? It is possible that civilization would struggle onward, never knowing the serenity of eclipses, the reassurance of tides, or the inspiration of moonlight. Our Earth would still be alive, but it might feel lonelier, harsher, less suited to the fragile miracle we call life. All of this makes the moon's current distance feel less accidental. When we imagine it farther away, we see the fragile chain of consequences unravel. Its exact position becomes not just convenient but essential. A silent hand, holding Earth steady, gifting us with nights soft enough to dream and days balanced enough to thrive. Step into this imagined future once more. The moon, having drifted far beyond its present orbit, looks diminished, a pale pebble lost among stars. It casts only the faintest glow. The oceans respond with whispers instead of waves, their tides so muted that shorelines no longer breathe in rhythm with the heavens. Coastal landscapes flatten, estuaries fall silent, and the symphony of tide pools those delicate nurseries of evolution goes quiet. What follows is not just ecological loss, but cultural silence. Without strong tides, seafaring might have been slower to flourish. Trade across waters, the mingling of peoples and ideas, could have been delayed by centuries. Civilizations that once rose on coastlines, nourished by fertile tidal flats, might never have reached their golden ages. Humanity's story would still be written, but the chapters would feel thinner, the margins narrower, the world less interconnected. And the sky, how barren it would feel. Without a commanding moon, the night would belong almost entirely to stars. Beautiful, yes, but abstract, far away, untouchable. The moon gave us a middle ground, something near enough to study, to dream about, to imagine visiting. Without it, our first ambitions of space might have been dimmed. Would we ever have reached for the cosmos at all, without that inviting neighbour hanging close by? The Apollo missions might never have existed. Humanity's great leap might never have left the ground. Psychologists sometimes speak of the lunar effect, not in the superstitious sense of madness, but in the quiet companionship the moon offers. Its phases gave shape to time. Its glow softened fear. Its very presence made the night feel less empty. In a world with a distant, diminished moon, that comfort would vanish. Nights would feel harsher, darker, and perhaps so would we. Humanity's art and spirit might have been shaped not by silver tenderness, but by deeper shadows. And so, when we imagine the moon farther away, we glimpse not only a different Earth, but a dimmer humanity. Life might exist, but thinner, harder, less inspired. The moon's retreat would strip away not just tides and seasons, but also wonder. It would rob us of the gentle invitation that has always pulled our eyes upward and whispered, "Reach further." As this thought settles, you begin to realize that the moon's current distance is not just convenient, it is essential, perhaps even uncanny. Too far, and the world falters. Exactly here, and the world thrives. It is balance so delicate that it begins to look deliberate. And if distance matters so much, then another question rises naturally. What if the moon were not farther, but closer? What storms, what upheavals, what new forms of chaos would unfold if our companion pressed nearer to Earth? That is where our journey drifts next, into the vision of a moon that comes too close, a presence no longer guardian, but threat. Now, let's turn the thought inside out. Instead of the moon drifting farther, picture it leaning closer. Imagine nights where the moon swells across the sky, not a coin but a plate, its craters sharp enough to trace with the naked eye. At first glance, such a view feels romantic, a more intimate moon, luminous and overwhelming. But step deeper into that vision, and intimacy becomes intrusion. A closer moon is no gift of beauty, it is a recipe for chaos. The first sign would be the tides. Even now, the moon's pull heaves entire oceans, lifting water into great bulges that sweep across the globe. Bring the moon closer, and those tides would grow monstrous. Waves would swell into walls, surging far inland. Coastal cities, harbours, fishing villages, all would drown again and again under relentless floods. Entire regions of the world would become uninhabitable, transformed into liquid battlefields between land and sea. And with stronger tides comes a restless earth itself. The moon's gravity does not only pull at water, it tugs at the crust, flexing and straining the planet's skin. A nearer moon would stir the ground like a spoon in soup. Volcanoes would awaken more often. Earthquakes would rattle continents. The steady ground beneath your feet would betray you, shivering under lunar influence. Where once the moon seemed a guardian, it would become a tormentor, shaking the earth from above. The rhythm of days, too, would falter. The moon acts as a brake on Earth's spin, gradually lengthening the day. If it were closer, the braking would intensify. Our planet's rotation could lurch towards shorter, harsher cycles before slowing in violent spasms. Imagine days of 16 hours, nights rushing past before bodies and ecosystems can adapt. Sleep cycles would fracture, weather patterns would twist, and entire food chains would stumble under the imbalance. And all the while, the moon would dominate the sky not as a gentle lantern, but as an overwhelming overseer. Its presence would no longer feel quiet or distant. It would feel oppressive, a looming neighbour pressing down on us. Where once poets saw romance, they might now see threat. Where once children whispered to it, they might cower from its swollen glow. The moon, too close, becomes less a mirror and more a magnifying glass, focusing instability, amplifying danger, turning Earth into a stage of chaos. Imagine walking along a coastline in this alternate world. The moon looms so large above you that it seems to press its weight upon the sea. Each high tide would roar like a beast unleashed, swallowing beaches, forests, and cities alike. Entire nations would have to retreat inland, abandoning coastlines that once nurtured trade, culture, and survival. Humanity would cluster on higher ground, not out of choice, but necessity. The map of civilization itself would be redrawn by tides that never rest. Marine life, finely tuned to the moon's current pull, would be thrown into disarray. Spawning cycles tied to tidal rhythms would collapse. Coral reefs, already fragile in our real world, would be battered to pieces by the endless violence of water. Migrating species would falter, unable to follow cues that had shaped their journeys for millions of years. Even the simplest creatures, crabs scuttling to lay eggs under a retreating tide, turtles searching for beaches in the night, would lose their synchrony with the earth. Extinctions would ripple outward, each loss compounding the next. On land, the turmoil would spread in subtler but no less devastating ways. The moon's amplified pull on Earth's crust would stir volcanic chains to greater fury. Whole regions might be smothered in ash more often, cooling skies and poisoning fields. Earthquakes would no longer be rare shocks, but expected intrusions, reminders that stability itself had been shattered. Civilizations might never trust their cities to stand long. Nomadic life could dominate, people forever moving to escape a restless planet. And then there is the weather. With Earth's rotation tugged and twisted by the closer moon, atmospheric currents would falter. Jet streams would lurch into strange positions. Storms would spiral larger and more destructive. Hurricanes, driven by unstable tides, could sweep farther inland, clawing at the heart of continents. The calm predictability of seasons would vanish, leaving behind only a patchwork of extremes. Crops might fail one year from endless rains, then the next from drought. Societies trapped in a rhythm too violent to master. Yet perhaps the most haunting change would not be physical, but psychological. Nights beneath such a moon would feel oppressive. Imagine it looming overhead, swollen and bright, filling half the horizon. Its glow would banish much of the natural darkness, bleaching the stars, erasing the quiet mystery of the night sky. Humanity would grow up not beneath a canvas of countless stars, but beneath a singular, glaring overseer. Wonder might give way to unease. Myths would still be written, but darker ones. Tales of punishment, of control, of a god too close to ignore. Art, too, would shift. Instead of paintings of serene moons over calm waters, Imagine murals of floods, of blazing craters in the sky, of restless gods demanding sacrifice. The moon would be less muse and more menace, reshaping the stories we told ourselves about the universe. And through it all, one truth would emerge. The moon's closeness is not gentle, it is domination. Its gravity, its presence, its gaze, all would overwhelm Earth, leaving little room for balance. Where our current moon whispers, this one would roar. Where today's moon invites us to dream, the nearer moon would command us to survive. If the moon pressed closer still, its dominion over Earth would not only be destructive, it might become final. Astronomers know that every orbit has a boundary, a point called the Roche limit. Cross that line, and the gravity of the planet tears a satellite apart. If our moon ever slipped inside that limit, it would shatter into fragments, raining debris into Earth's skies. For weeks, even months, the heavens would blaze with fire as broken shards streaked downward. Oceans would boil under impacts, forests would ignite, and the steady guardian we once knew would end as an agent of catastrophe. Even before such an endgame, a nearer moon would gnaw at Earth's stability. Days shortened, nights fractured, climates whipped into frenzy. The planet would be caught in a relentless tug of war. Civilizations would be forced into patterns of constant rebuilding, never allowed the luxury of permanence. Every city might feel temporary, every temple a fragile offering to the sky. Instead of trusting the heavens as a backdrop of order, humanity might see them as a looming threat, a reminder that we lived at the mercy of forces beyond taming. And yet, amid that terror, there would also be wonder. A moon so large in the sky would be impossible to ignore. Artists would paint it, storytellers would describe it, children would grow up with its colossal face as their first memory of night. But those stories would carry tones of dread, not comfort. The moon would not be a gentle muse, but a tyrant in the heavens, inspiring awe edged with fear. When you compare this imagined world with our own, a pattern becomes clear. Too far, and life falters. Too close, and chaos reigns. Only here, only now, at this exact distance, does the moon serve as stabilizer, guardian, and guide. Its presence is not merely aesthetic, it is existential. We live in a fragile band of balance, and the moon sits in just the right place to hold it together. And so the question lingers, stronger than before. Is it possible that such perfection is mere accident? That the tides, the seasons, the stability of climates, the beauty of eclipses all just happen to align by chance? Or is there something deliberate, something intentional about this arrangement? As our journey drifts forward, we'll step from imagining these what-ifs into the strange reality itself. Because the more we look at the moon's position not too far, not too close, and exactly perfect, the harder it becomes to shake the suspicion that it was never random at all. Science, at its core, loves patterns. When astronomers peer into the sky, they look for laws, for rules, for repetitions that explain the seeming chaos of the universe. And often, they succeed. Planets orbit because of gravity, stars shine because of fusion, galaxies swirl according to mass and motion. But when scientists turn their eyes to our moon, something unnerving happens. The neat explanations falter, and what emerges instead is a string of coincidences so delicate, so unlikely, that even the most rational minds find themselves unsettled. Take, for example, the sheer size of the moon compared to Earth. Among all the planets of our solar system, no other has a satellite so large relative to its host. Jupiter and Saturn have moons larger than ours, yes, but those gas giants are hundreds of times Earth's mass. By proportion, our moon is an anomaly, almost a planet in its own right, locked in orbit around us. Some scientists even refer to the Earth-Moon system as a double planet, because the balance is so unusual. This is not what textbooks predict as normal. It is an outlier, standing alone among the patterns of planetary systems. Then there is its orbit. The moon does not circle us on a perfect flat path. Instead, its orbit is tilted about 5 degrees relative to Earth's plane around the Sun, and slightly elongated, stretched into an ellipse rather than a circle. This combination is odd, and it means the moon does not behave like a simple, predictable satellite. The tilt and shape of its orbit cause the moon to appear larger or smaller in our sky at different times, a wobbling dance that contributes to the spectacle of eclipses. Again, not a flaw in nature, but a strangeness, a reminder that the moon is never quite where we expect it to be. And then comes the most haunting fact, its rotation. The moon spins at precisely the right rate to show us only one face, a phenomenon called tidal locking. From Earth, we always see the same side, its familiar craters forming a permanent portrait in our night sky. The other side, the so-called far side, is hidden, forever turned away. That such synchronization occurs is not impossible. Physics explains tidal locking, but the perfection of it, the exact balance between spin and orbit, maintained over billions of years, feels uncanny. Why should it align so neatly, so completely, that an entire hemisphere of the moon is invisible to us? These details add up. A moon too large for its planet, an orbit tilted and stretched, a rotation perfectly synchronized, a position so exact that it creates eclipses unlike any other. Each fact can be explained in isolation, yes, but together they stack like improbable cards, forming a tower that seems too neat, too balanced to be chance alone. For many scientists, the instinct is to double down on natural explanations, to refine theories of collision, capture, or co-formation until they fit. But even as they do, a quiet discomfort lingers. The moon, our constant companion, looks less like a random leftover of cosmic chaos and more like something tuned, not just present, but placed. When faced with unsettling facts, science responds with theories. For the moon, three main ideas dominate the conversation: the capture theory, the co-formation theory, and the giant impact hypothesis. Each has its strengths. Each also stumbles, leaving gaps that trouble even the most patient astronomers. The capture theory imagines Earth pulling the moon in from elsewhere. Perhaps it wandered through the early solar system, a drifter caught by Earth's gravity. This would explain some of its oddities, like its tilted orbit, but capturing an object of the moon's size cleanly, without it crashing or flying off, is astonishingly difficult. The odds stretch thin. It is like catching a cannonball with bare hands and somehow setting it into a perfect dance around you. Possible? Yes. Likely? Not at all. The co-formation theory suggests Earth and the moon were born together, siblings forming side by side from the same disk of dust and gas. On the surface, this feels neat, but chemistry betrays it. Samples from the Apollo missions revealed that lunar rocks share striking similarities with Earth's mantle, more than siblings should. If the moon had formed alongside us, its composition should show more distinct differences. Instead, it seems carved from our own body, as if torn away. That leads to the giant impact hypothesis, the favorite of modern science. In this view, a Mars-sized body, sometimes called Theia, slammed into the early Earth. The collision sprayed molten debris into space, which eventually coalesced into the moon. This theory explains the moon's composition, its size, and even its strange orbit. But even here, questions remain. For one, computer models struggle to recreate the precise conditions that would produce a moon with exactly the properties we see today. Small changes in angle or speed in these simulations produce outcomes wildly different. Moons too small, orbits unstable, debris falling back to Earth instead of coalescing. And then, there are the lingering mysteries Apollo left behind. When astronauts placed seismometers on the lunar surface, they detected something astonishing. During controlled impacts, when modules or spent rockets were crashed into the moon, it rang for hours as though hollow. The phrase, "the moon rang like a bell," entered headlines. Explanations point to its dry, fractured geology, which transmits vibrations differently than Earth. But for those inclined to suspicion, it sounded like confirmation that the moon might not be solid at all. Scientists, of course, remain cautious. They insist that anomalies do not imply design, and yet the language they use betrays unease. Papers describe the moon's size as strangely large. Its orbit is called unusual. Its synchronized rotation is peculiar. Each word is small, but together they form a chorus of discomfort. The moon does not fit neatly into any theory. It resists being fully explained, and this resistance gnaws at something deeper. Science thrives on predictability. When faced with the moon's perfect position, its improbable eclipses, its balancing role in Earth's stability, some scientists quietly admit what laypeople feel instinctively. It seems too perfect, like a safe cracked open to reveal a mechanism of precision, rather than a mess of chance. Perhaps what unsettles scientists most is not any single anomaly, but the way they stack together: a large satellite that behaves more like a twin, an orbit tilted just enough to puzzle, a rotation locked with eerie perfection, a distance that allows eclipses too exact to be dismissed. None of these alone is impossible, but together they form a pattern that whispers of intention, as though the moon were a puzzle assembled rather than an accident scattered. And this is where unease gives way to imagination. Some researchers, speaking cautiously, describe it as a cosmic coincidence of extraordinary degree. Others admit privately that the moon sometimes feels less like a leftover of planetary chaos and more like a piece of architecture, a structure in the sky serving multiple roles at once: stabilizer, timekeeper, performer of eclipses, companion to evolution. Its functions are so many, so finely tuned, that the idea of randomness begins to strain. Yet science resists easy leaps. The instinct is always to search for better models, sharper data, cleaner simulations, and so the theories evolve, patched and refined. New computer runs attempt to recreate the giant impact, tweaking angles and velocities in search of that perfect outcome. Lunar samples are reanalyzed with new technology, trying to fit chemistry into the story. The conversation continues not because the moon is ordinary, but because it refuses to be ordinary. For the rest of us, though, the strangeness is enough. To step outside on a clear night and see a disk so perfectly proportioned, so quietly necessary to life's balance, is to feel a twinge of suspicion. The moon does not behave like a random companion. It behaves like a key fitting locks we never knew existed, turning the tumblers of tides, climate, and wonder with effortless grace. Is it chance? Is it design? Science leans toward chance, but even its language betrays discomfort. And into that discomfort rush other voices, voices willing to ask if the moon is not merely natural but constructed or placed. This is where speculation begins to merge with theory, where imagination tests the boundaries of reason. But before we drift fully into speculation, we must linger with the dominant explanation of modern science, the giant impact hypothesis. It is the theory most widely embraced, the one that tries to hold all the oddities in its hands. Yet even here, cracks remain, and by tracing those cracks, we move closer to the possibility that the moon's story is stranger than science dares to admit. If the moon hides a secret, many believe it lies not on its surface but within. The dust and craters we see each night are only a skin. Beneath that skin, the moon keeps its silence, a silence that Apollo tried to break. When the Apollo astronauts planted seismometers on the lunar surface in the late 1960 seconds and early 1970 seconds, they gave humanity its first chance to listen to the moon's heartbeat. For years, these instruments recorded tremors from moonquakes, meteor impacts, and even deliberate crashes, when discarded modules were guided into the surface to create controlled seismic events. What they heard was unlike anything expected. On Earth, earthquakes ripple through rock and fade quickly. Vibrations are absorbed by moisture, by molten interiors, by complex geological layers. But on the moon, the quakes rang on and on sometimes. For nearly an hour, scientists described the effect as the moon rang like a bell. The phrase captured imaginations instantly. Was the moon hollow, echoing like a vast shell? The official explanation pointed to dryness. The moon lacks water and a hot, molten core. Its fractured, rigid crust transmits vibrations far more efficiently than Earth's. It was not proof of hollowness, but of difference. Yet the imagery refused to die. A bell in the sky, an echoing world, a sound that felt more artificial than natural. Other findings added fuel to the fire. Lunar density is oddly low compared to Earth. While Earth's iron core accounts for much of its mass, The moon seems to have only a tiny metallic heart. Its mass distribution is uneven, marked by mascons buried gravitational anomalies that tug at spacecraft in strange ways. Some scientists attribute these to massive ancient impacts, their scars hidden under lava flows. But to those inclined towards suspicion, mascons look less like scars and more like structures, reinforcements, foundations. Speculation stretches further. If the moon were hollow, could it be a shell? If it contained vast cavities, could they be artificial? Some writers in the 1,970 seconds suggested enormous internal chambers, perhaps strong enough to resist meteor strikes that would otherwise dig deeper craters. Others imagined metallic layers, reinforcing walls hidden under dust and stone. These ideas may sound fantastical, but they were born not from imagination alone. They were sparked by the strangeness of the data itself. Even today, our knowledge of the moon's deep interior is incomplete. Seismic readings were limited, patchy, and confined to the near side. We know there is a small core, perhaps molten at its center, but far too small to account for Earth-like density. We know its mantle is fractured and unusual, but whether it hides cavities, denser metallic layers, or something altogether unexpected, remains unresolved. And that uncertainty leaves room for wonder. The moon may be dry rock, yes, but it may also be more than rock. Its silence may not be emptiness, but concealment. Its hollowness may not be absence, but design. In the decades after Apollo, new eyes turned toward the moon. Orbiters carrying sensitive instruments began to map its gravity with unprecedented precision. Among the most revealing was NASA's Grail mission in 2011-2012, which sent twin spacecraft circling the moon in tandem, measuring the tiniest shifts in their distance as lunar gravity tugged at them. What emerged was a picture both detailed and perplexing. The data confirmed what earlier missions had hinted. The moon's mass is not evenly distributed. Beneath the smooth plains of the near side lurk mascons, mass concentrations so dense that they pull spacecraft off course, forcing mission planners to constantly adjust orbits. For decades, mascons were a dangerous mystery, a gravitational trap that nearly doomed some early lunar missions. Grail revealed them in astonishing clarity. Vast buried structures, circular and clustered under ancient impact basins. The standard explanation is that when giant asteroids struck the moon billions of years ago, the molten rock flooded the basins. The dense lava cooled and sank, leaving behind gravitational anomalies. But to those who favour the artificial hypothesis, mascons seem too neat, too regular, too much like reinforced foundations hidden beneath the surface, as though something had been placed deliberately to stabilise the moon's shell. Other oddities fuel the speculation. Some craters, despite being struck by immense meteors, are unexpectedly shallow. Instead of gouging deep wounds, the impacts seem to stop short, as if colliding with a hard, impenetrable layer just beneath the dust. To mainstream geologists, this suggests differences in crust thickness and internal composition, but to fringe thinkers, it suggests armour, a metallic shell preventing deeper penetration. There are also electromagnetic anomalies. Certain regions of the moon emit unusual magnetic signatures, unexpected for a body thought to have such a weak core. Pockets of magnetism linger in patterns hard to explain. Are they remnants of an ancient dynamo, long since extinguished? Or could they be traces of something metallic embedded within, not natural at all, but structural? And still the seismic data lingers in memory. The moon rings. Its tremors last and last, unlike the quick shudders of Earth. Scientists assure us the effect comes from its dryness, its rigidity, its fractured geology. Yet the imagery of a bell tolling in the night sky is too evocative to dismiss. To many, it is not explanation but metaphor, a hollow body calling attention to itself. What then lies inside? Some researchers speculate vast cavities may exist, remnants of ancient volcanic tubes, empty chambers where lava once flowed. To some imaginations, these are not natural voids, but habitable spaces, corridors, large enough for machines, bases, even civilizations. Others lean toward the metallic hypothesis, that beneath the crust lies a dense, artificial skeleton, perhaps a shell that keeps the moon intact. These ideas are far from accepted, but they illustrate the pull of mystery. For every anomaly, science offers a cautious explanation. For every cautious explanation, speculation offers a wilder one. And in the tension between the two, the moon's interior remains one of the most fascinating unknowns in the sky. Because if the moon truly hides hollows or metal deep inside, it could be the strongest evidence yet that it is not just a satellite but a structure. When all of the findings are gathered, the seismic echoes, the mascons, the shallow craters, the scattered magnetic fields, they form a picture that is both incomplete and unsettling. None of these mysteries taken alone prove that the moon is hollow or metallic, yet together they leave behind a residue of doubt, a whisper that the moon is not as straightforward as we pretend it to be. The scientific community has leaned toward conservative explanations: dry geology, fractured crusts, impact scars buried under lava. Each account holds weight. And yet, the metaphors endure: the moon that rings like a bell, the shell that seems too hard beneath the dust, the hidden structures that tug at spacecraft. These are not just data points, they are stories, and stories linger long after numbers fade. For those who dream in speculation, the possibilities stretch wide. Perhaps the moon contains vast caverns, natural or otherwise, waiting like unopened rooms in a house we have only stepped inside. Perhaps a metallic skeleton lies beneath, relic of an ancient construction too vast to imagine. Or perhaps what we call anomalies are not accidents but deliberate fingerprints, left for us to puzzle over once we became capable of noticing. Even skeptics admit that the moon's interior is poorly mapped compared to Earth. We have only shallow seismic readings, confined to the near side. We have never drilled, never tunneled, never explored its depths directly. For all our satellites and sensors, much of the moon remains unknown. In that unknown, mystery survives. And maybe that is the point. The moon has always been more than an object. It is a mirror for our imagination. When it shines quietly above us, we see what we want to see: a guardian, a riddle, a machine, a lantern. To some, its hollowness is metaphor, to others, it is evidence. But in both cases, it keeps us looking upward, questioning. And so the question remains: what lies inside? Rock, dust, void, or vault? The answer waits in silence. And until we know, the moon's interior will remain one of the most haunting unknowns in our sky. From here, our path drifts not downward into rock, but backward in time into the stories told by civilizations long before science touched the lunar surface. Stories that speak of an Earth without a moon, of nights darker than ours, and of a moment when the silver companion first appeared in the sky. If science struggles to tell us exactly how the moon was born, perhaps the oldest voices we can turn to are not astronomers at all, but storytellers. Across the world, in fragments of myth and memory, there are whispers of a time when the moon was not yet in the sky, a time before the moon. These tales are strange, haunting, and easily dismissed as metaphor. Yet when we set them beside the peculiarities of the moon itself, they feel less like mere invention and more like echoes of something half-remembered. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle noted that certain tribes, such as the Arcadians, claimed their lineage went back to a time before the moon. They were called proselenes, the people before the moon. According to legend, they lived in a world darker and wilder, a world without the steady companion we take for granted. Only later, after the moon appeared, did time itself take on the rhythm we know today. Further west, in Colombia, the Muisca people told stories of a time when the moon had not yet risen, and humanity wandered under star-filled skies alone. In their myths, the moon was a later arrival, a powerful goddess who joined the sun to create balance in the heavens. Without her, the world was incomplete, too bright by day, too empty by night. Among the Zulu of southern Africa, there are also tales that the moon was placed in the sky deliberately by two brothers, Wawane and Mpanku, who rolled it into position. In their telling, the moon was not a natural presence but a gift, a lantern lit and hung above the earth to regulate life. It was a deliberate act, a piece of cosmic engineering rendered in myth. These stories, scattered across continents, share a peculiar resonance. They do not treat the moon as eternal. Instead, they remember a world before its light, Whether these are poetic inventions or cultural memories, they speak to something rare in mythology, a collective sense that the moon is an arrival rather than a given. And perhaps that is why these myths feel so unsettling. They suggest that humanity, in some deep layer of its past, carried a memory, real or imagined, of the sky without a moon. A memory of transition, of installation, of a night changed forever when the silver disk first appeared. If the Greeks, Zulu and Muisca remembered a time without the moon, they were not alone. Other fragments, scattered across the world's oldest traditions, whisper the same theme. The moon was not always with us. It arrived. It was placed. It was a change written into the sky. In South America, the Chibcha people of ancient Colombia told of a time before the moon, when the world was cloaked in darkness and confusion. Only after the moon appeared did the natural order settle into place: tides, crops, and cycles of fertility. It was as though the moon were not just a light, but a regulator, a cosmic metronome that set life into rhythm. The Mayan codices, filled with intricate glyphs and calendars, also carry echoes of a world in transition. While the sun was central to their cosmology, the moon was a younger presence, tied to fertility, water, and cycles of rebirth. Some scholars interpret their myths to suggest that the moon was not eternal but an addition, introduced to balance the power of the Sunday. In the Near East, stories recorded by ancient Sumerians hint at celestial bodies being assigned their places by the gods. The moon god Nana, or Sin, was not simply born with the heavens, but installed, given a path, a cycle, a duty. Placed is the word that surfaces again and again in translations, as if even the earliest astronomer priests sensed order, not accident, in its role. Travel eastward, and the Chinese legend of Chang'e carries its own peculiar resonance. Chang'e, after drinking the elixir of immortality, ascends to the moon and dwells there forever, a sudden appearance in the sky where once there had been none. To generations of Chinese poets, the moon became a reminder of separation and longing, but in its mythical origin, it was an event, an arrival that transformed the heavens. Even among the Inuit of the Arctic, the moon is not a timeless object, but a being who once walked the earth. Melina, the sun goddess, flees from her brother Anningen, who becomes the moon. The chase between them is eternal, but the myth begins with change, with transformation, with the moon entering the sky not as background, but as character. Across these traditions, the pattern is striking. The moon is not simply there, it is introduced, rolled, placed, chased, or ascended. Its presence is not background but plot. Myths often exaggerate, but they also preserve memory in symbolic form. And when myths from such distant cultures converge on the same odd theme that the moon was not always in the sky, it becomes harder to dismiss them outright. Perhaps these stories are metaphor, explaining natural cycles in human terms, or perhaps they are cultural echoes of an ancient observation that the moon, so perfect in its place, feels less like a permanent neighbour and more like a late arrival, a lantern hung deliberately above the earth. When we gather these myths side by side, from Arcadian shepherds in Greece to Zulu storytellers in Africa, from Muisca farmers in Colombia to scribes in Mesopotamia, a strange harmony begins to emerge. Each culture spoke its own language, worshipped its own gods, lived on its own continent, yet they all carried a similar whisper: the moon was not always there. Skeptics see this as coincidence. Human imagination, after all, often invents beginnings and arrivals. But to those inclined toward wonder, the convergence feels uncanny. How could people so far apart, with no contact between them, to invent the same unusual idea that the most constant object in the night sky was once absent? Perhaps they were speaking in metaphor, or perhaps they were preserving a memory so ancient, so dim, that it now survives only as myth. Consider how myths often encode truth in story. Flood myths, scattered across the world, may echo real geological floods. Fire gods may be memories of volcanoes. Serpents swallowing the sun may be poetry for eclipses. If so, then what does it mean when so many traditions speak of a time before the moon? Could it reflect humanity's deep intuition that the moon is not a natural fixture, but an arrival, something placed? Even the language of these myths leans toward design. The Zulu brothers rolled the moon into the sky, Sumerian gods assigned it its path. To the Akkadians, the moon came after their people. These are not the words of eternal presence. They are the words of installation, of placement, of intention. Whether these myths are metaphor, memory, or something stranger, they add another layer to the moon's enigma. Science shows us anomalies in density, orbit, and formation. Myths show us stories of arrival and placement. Together, they weave a pattern that is difficult to ignore. The moon feels less like an accident and more like a deliberate companion. And so our journey drifts from story back into speculation. If the moon was not always there, if it arrived, or was placed, then how? Could a body so massive truly be drawn into orbit and held steady? Could it be captured not by chance, but by choice? These are the questions that guide us into the next mystery. The hypothesis that the moon was not formed here at all, but was pulled into Earth's orbit deliberately. When you step outside at night and see the moon's pale glow, it can be tempting to think of it as decoration, a lantern hung in the sky. Beautiful but passive. Yet in truth, the moon is no ornament. It is an architect, a quiet engineer shaping the stage upon which life unfolded. Without it, Earth itself would have been a different planet, and humanity as we know it may never have come to be. The most immediate influence lies in the tides. Every day, the moon's gravity pulls at our oceans, lifting them into great bulges that sweep across the globe. To us, they are waves lapping at shorelines, predictable rhythms that fishermen and sailors have long relied upon. But in the deep past, those tides were more than a convenience. They were a cradle. Billions of years ago, in the shallows where ocean met land, life first crept out of the sea. Organisms trapped in tidal pools were forced to adapt, to breathe air, to survive brief moments on land. Without tides, this evolutionary pressure might never have existed. The slow, fragile leap from water to land, the step that eventually gave rise to us, may never have occurred. The moon also steadies Earth's axial tilt. Our planet leans at about 23.5 degrees, giving us the cycle of seasons. Without the moon, that tilt would wobble chaotically under the pull of other planets, shifting wildly over millions of years. Imagine summers turning into freezing winters, deserts into floodplains, climates in constant flux. In such a world, stable ecosystems would struggle to form. Complex life, reliant on balance and predictability, might never take root. The moon's presence pins Earth in place, keeping the seasons gentle enough for forests to grow, for ice caps to form, for humans to farm. Even the length of our days owes something to the moon. In Earth's infancy, a day lasted only 6 hours, the planet spinning wildly fast. Over time, the moon's gravity acted as a brake, slowing the rotation until days stretched into the 24-hour rhythm we now live by. This rhythm shapes our biology, our sleep, our very sense of time. Without the moon's drag, we might inhabit a frantic world of rapid days and nights, where life would be driven to adapt in entirely different ways. Would intelligence ever evolve under such conditions? Or would creatures live shorter, harsher lives, too consumed by survival to ever wonder at the stars? What emerges from these threads is a single truth. The moon has been a co-author of evolution. Its gravity, its stability, its silent partnership with Earth wrote conditions into being that life could flourish within. Remove it from the story, and the narrative unravels. And so, when we gaze up at its familiar glow, we are not looking at a passive companion. We are looking at one of the reasons we exist at all. Without the moon, humanity's story would not just be different, it might never have been written. The moon's influence reaches far beyond tides and tilt. It touches life itself, weaving its cycles into the very fabric of biology. Even today, countless creatures live by the rhythm of the lunar clock. Corals spawn in synchrony with the full moon, releasing clouds of eggs and sperm into the sea at the same precise moment, guided not by sunlight, but by lunar glow. Sea turtles crawl onto beaches under moonlight to bury their eggs, relying on its silver guidance. Fish, insects, even plants whisper to the moon's cycle, timing their survival to its steady phases. Humans, too, are not untouched by this rhythm. Ancient agricultural societies planted and harvested by the moon's phases, trusting its waxing and waning more than calendars. Festivals and rituals across cultures were tied to its glow. Ramadan in Islam, Passover in Judaism, Easter in Christianity, Mid-Autumn in China. Even our word month springs from the moon, marking time not by the sun's grand sweep but by the smaller, intimate pulse above our heads. Without the moon, timekeeping itself might have evolved differently, perhaps clumsier, less aligned with nature's subtler cycles. The moon has also left fingerprints on our biology. Some researchers suggest that the menstrual cycle's average length, close to 29.5 days, may be no coincidence, echoing the lunar month. Though modern life obscures these patterns, ancient peoples noticed the connection and wove it into myth and medicine. To them, the moon was not just a light but a partner in fertility, a cosmic rhythm bound to the rhythm of the body. Even human psychology bears its mark. Moonlight softened the terror of the dark, offering just enough glow for early humans to hunt, gather, or travel safely at night. Tribes beneath its watchful light could expand their range, move under its silver veil, and dream by its presence. The night without a moon would have been deeper, harsher, less forgiving. With it, humans could extend their activity, weaving stories by firelight while glancing upward at a sky that felt alive. And then, there is imagination. For millennia, the moon has been a mirror for our minds. We looked at its pale face and saw gods, lovers, monsters, rabbits pounding immortality elixirs, and men gazing back. It became our first canvas in the sky, a blank space upon which every culture painted its fears and desires. Without it, perhaps we would still dream, but our dreams would lack that shared symbol, that constant companion reminding us that the universe is vast and yet close enough to touch. Taken together, the moon has shaped not only Earth's environment but humanity's identity. It guided our ancestors, measured our time, inspired our myths, and quietly pressed its hand into our biology. Remove it, and the arc of human evolution changes course. We might still exist, but we would not be us. Consider, for a moment, an Earth stripped of its moon. The tides would shrink into timid ripples, never pushing life onto shorelines where adaptation could begin. The tilt of our planet would stagger unpredictably, lurching from extremes of ice to searing heat, never settling long enough for stable ecosystems to take hold. Days would race past in frantic cycles, too short for balance, too harsh for complexity. It would still be a world, yes, but a restless one. A world of simple organisms clinging to survival rather than branching into the diversity we know. In such a world, the arc of evolution might stall. Forests and grasslands might never emerge. Agriculture might never be possible. Civilizations might never rise. And if humans did appear, they would be something very different from us, shaped by chaos, hardened by instability, perhaps clever but unlikely to dream in the same way. For dreams require stability, the quiet repetition of nights under a familiar sky. The moon gave us that stage. Even our sense of wonder is bound to it. How many times in human history has someone looked up and felt inspired to tell a story, to carve a calendar, to build a temple aligned with its glow? Without that luminous neighbour, the night sky would still be beautiful, but it would lack its anchor. It would feel vast and empty, a canvas too blank to comfort. The moon is not merely a companion, it is a guide, a metronome, a muse. And so, when we say humanity would not exist as it does without the moon, it is no exaggeration. From the molecules of life stirred in tidal pools, to the rhythms of our bodies, to the myths and calendars of our civilizations, the moon has been there not passively, but actively shaping the path. Its gravity steadied us, its light inspired us, its cycles taught us to measure, to wait, to imagine. Remove it, and the story of Earth becomes unrecognizable. With it, the story becomes ours. The moon is not just part of our history, it is the silent co-author of our existence. And if its influence is so finely tuned, so essential to life and to us, then perhaps we must return to that lingering question. Was this perfection mere chance or design? For some, the answer lies in seeing the moon not only as a stabilizer, but as a timekeeper, an artifact of cosmic engineering meant to regulate life itself. For every whisper of an artificial moon, there is a chorus of scientists who reply, no, not because they lack imagination, but because science lives by evidence, and evidence, the kind that can be weighed, measured, repeated, still leans toward natural explanations. To them, the moon is extraordinary, yes, but not impossible. It is an outlier, not an artifact. One reason mainstream science resists the artificial hypothesis is chemistry. The rocks brought back by Apollo are, in their view, profoundly earthly. Their isotopic fingerprints, especially in oxygen ratios, are almost indistinguishable from Earth's mantle. To scientists, this suggests not construction, but kinship. The moon was once part of Earth, or at least born of the same material. If the moon were a hollow shell or foreign insertion, its chemistry should reveal it. Instead, it tells a story of common origin. Another rebuttal lies in physics. While it is true that capturing an object as massive as the moon is improbable, it is not impossible that a colossal collision could explain its presence. The giant impact hypothesis, though imperfect, accounts for many anomalies. The moon's size, its lack of volatile elements, its tilted orbit. Simulations continue to refine the details, and while they do not yet match reality perfectly, they are close enough to satisfy many researchers. To scientists, imperfection is not failure, it is progress in motion. There is also the matter of parsimony. In science, the simplest explanation that fits the data is often favoured. Proposing ancient alien engineers or hollow constructions multiplies assumptions without adding hard proof. Why invoke intention, they argue, when natural chaos collisions, accretion, tidal forces can explain most of what we see? Until there is evidence of machinery beneath the crust, the simpler path is to assume geology, not technology. And finally, there is caution born of history. Time and again, humanity has filled gaps in knowledge with elaborate stories, only to watch those stories crumble under the weight of new discoveries. Lightning was once seen as divine anger, comets as omens, eclipses as supernatural warnings. Today, they are natural phenomena explained by physics. To many scientists, the artificial moon hypothesis is simply another chapter in this long tradition, a story we tell to fill the silence of what we do not yet understand. This does not mean scientists dismiss the moon's strangeness. They too call it unusual, peculiar, even uncanny. But unusual does not mean unnatural. Peculiar does not mean artificial. To them, the moon's perfection is the poetry of coincidence, not the signature of design. When scientists weigh the evidence, they return again and again to what the rocks and instruments say, and what they say, for the most part, points not to artifice but to geology. The lunar surface itself, though alien and stark, is consistent with a battered natural body. Craters of every size, overlapping across billions of years, tell a story of relentless impacts, the kind of scars that accumulate naturally in a solar system teeming with debris. To mainstream geologists, the shallow depth of some craters is not evidence of armor beneath the crust, but of a complex interplay between crustal thickness, volcanic flows, and rebound mechanics. The moon's face, in their eyes, is rough but explainable, a natural canvas painted by time. The mascons, those gravitational anomalies that once puzzled spacecraft engineers, are likewise viewed through a natural lens. The prevailing explanation is that when massive asteroids struck the moon, they created giant basins that later filled with dense lava. That cooled lava, heavier than the surrounding crust, created hidden concentrations of mass. To scientists, this does not suggest buried machinery, but simple density contrasts confirmed by models and laboratory experiments. Even the ringing like a bell, the phrase that launched so much speculation, is, in scientific terms, less mysterious than it sounds. The moon lacks water, atmosphere, and a hot core, all of which dampens seismic waves on Earth. As a result, vibrations linger longer, echoing through rigid rock like sound through crystal. To geologists, the effect is strange only to human ears. In physics, it is unsurprising. The metaphor was poetic, but not literal. The orbit and tilt, too, though unusual, can be folded into natural models. The 5-degree tilt of the moon's orbit may be the leftover of early chaos, smoothed but not erased by billions of years of gravitational nudges. Its eccentric path can be explained by resonances with the Sun and Earth's gravity. Though the models are imperfect, they produce outcomes within the realm of possibility. To scientists, anomalies are challenges to refine equations, not invitations to abandon them. And perhaps the strongest rebuttal is this: no direct evidence of artificiality has ever been found. Every probe, rover, and orbiter has returned images of dust, stone, and regolith. Every rock sample studied under microscopes shows crystalline structures, isotopic ratios, and mineral formations consistent with natural processes. There are no alloys that cannot be explained, no signs of machinery, no unmistakable fingerprints of technology. In science, absence of evidence does not equal evidence of absence, but it does weigh heavily. For the scientific community, then, the artificial moon hypothesis remains unnecessary. Natural explanations, even if incomplete, are more plausible than invoking alien engineers. To believe otherwise, they argue, is to leap over the gap between mystery and imagination without building a bridge of evidence. And yet, even within this rebuttal, an echo of wonder remains. Scientists can explain much, but not all. Their caution keeps them grounded, but their own words, unusual, peculiar, oddly perfect, reveal the quiet tug of mystery that even equations cannot erase. In the end, the strength of the scientific rebuttal lies not in dismissing wonder, but in demanding proof. Scientists are, by nature, cautious storytellers. They will not say, never, but they will say, not yet. Not yet have we found alloys where none should be. Not yet have we drilled into hollow chambers. Not yet have we detected signals whispering from within the moon. Until then, they hold to the explanations that can be tested, measured, and modelled. It is also a matter of discipline. Science is built on falsifiability, the idea that a claim must be testable, able to be proven wrong. To call the moon artificial without evidence is to make a claim that cannot yet be tested. That does not mean it is impossible, only that it sits outside the realm of science until evidence can step forward. This boundary frustrates some, but it is also what keeps science from collapsing under the weight of unchecked imagination. And there is humility in their stance. Astronomers and geologists freely admit that the moon still puzzles them. Its exact formation remains unresolved, its deep interior poorly understood. The giant impact hypothesis is powerful, but not flawless. The chemistry is consistent with Earth, but also stranger than expected. In their eyes, these gaps are not invitations to leap to aliens, but invitations to look harder, to design better missions, to gather more data. So science stands firm, holding the moon as natural until proven otherwise. To them, that is not stubbornness, but responsibility. For if the moon were truly artificial, the proof would be so extraordinary, so world-changing, that it would need to be undeniable. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and until such evidence appears, the safest story is still geology. And yet, the story does not end here, because even as scientists close the book with equations and models, the human imagination keeps reading between the lines. The what-if persists, whispering in the silence between data points. What if the moon really was placed? What if it is more than stone and dust? These whispers lead us beyond science and into philosophy. For if the moon were artificial, if its perfection were by design, then what would that say about us? About life? About the universe itself? To ask those questions is not to abandon science, but to stretch it to see beyond what is proven, into the realm of meaning. And that is where we turn next, not to rebuttals or equations, but to reflection. For the final step of our journey asks not what the moon is, but what it would mean if it were more than we thought. There comes a moment, after the theories and counter-theories, after the seismic charts and the myths of forgotten peoples, when words grow quiet. The moon still hangs above us, unchanged by our speculation, untouched by our questions. It glows just as it did for the first humans who ever lifted their eyes in wonder, just as it will for generations yet to be born. Perhaps this is the true lesson of the moon, not certainty but perspective. We can argue endlessly over whether it was torn from Earth, captured from elsewhere, or placed by unseen hands. Yet the moon itself does not answer. It keeps its silence, patient and steady, like an elder who smiles but never reveals the full story. In that silence, we are reminded of something deeper, that not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist to be felt. When you stand beneath the night sky, with its scattering of stars and that pale, faithful lantern above, you feel the weight of both smallness and connection. The moon has been the backdrop to every human story, to love and war, to poems whispered and songs sung, to the quiet breath of a child falling asleep. Whether it is natural or artificial, coincidence or design, does not erase its role. Its mystery binds us together, linking every age, every culture, every soul that has ever paused to look upward. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the point of the moon's strangeness is not to hand us answers, but to remind us to keep asking. To be human is not to know everything, but to wonder, to sit with uncertainty and let it make us humble, to look at that silver face and feel both curiosity and comfort. So tonight, as you drift into rest, let the moon's quiet presence be your companion. Not a riddle to be solved, but a reminder that the universe is vast, that we are small, and that smallness is not weakness, but wonder. When you allow yourself to rest in that thought that the moon does not need to be explained to be meaningful, the night feels softer somehow. The glow filtering through your window, the way it brushes rooftops and treetops in silver, becomes less a question and more a gift. You do not need to solve it to feel it. You do not need certainty to sense its quiet companionship. Think of all the countless eyes gazing upward at this same moon tonight. A traveller on a quiet road, a child at a bedroom window, a fisherman out at sea, a nurse on a night shift break. You, listening now, in your own small corner of the world. Each of us is wrapped in our own life, our own worries, and yet we share this luminous companion. We are scattered like stars across the earth, but the moon gathers us together under one sky. And maybe that is the greatest secret of all, not how the moon came to be, but how it holds us in a kind of unspoken communion. Across cultures, languages, and centuries, it has been the same face looking down, unchanging in its watchfulness. We call it by different names, we tell different stories, but it reflects something universal, the longing to understand, and the comfort of being small within something vast. So as we close this journey, let the mystery be not a burden, but a balm. Let the moon's silence soothe you. Let its strangeness remind you that not everything must be solved before it can be loved. Some questions are meant to stay open, like windows, letting the night air in. Perhaps you can feel that now, the gentle stillness, the way the world softens when you stop demanding answers and simply listen. In that space, wonder becomes rest, and rest becomes peace. And now, as our thoughts drift to a close, let yourself imagine the moon not as a puzzle demanding solution, but as a lantern steady in the night, one that has always been there, quietly guiding the rhythm of life. Whether it is natural or crafted, coincidence or design, matters less in this moment than the feeling it stirs, that we are part of something greater, and that wonder itself is enough. So perhaps, instead of chasing answers tonight, you might simply rest beneath the glow. Let its silver calmness wash over you. Let its stillness remind you that mystery can be a kind of comfort. The moon has always been humanity's mirror of myths, of fears, of love, of longing. Tonight, let it mirror your own quiet need for peace. As you listen, I'd love to know, where in the world are you right now? Is the moon above your sky as you drift into sleep, or hidden behind clouds waiting for another night? Share your local time in the comments if you like. It's always magical to see how far this little constellation of listeners stretches, each of us in our own place, yet gathered under one pale light. And if this gentle journey has brought you a moment of calm, a spark of wonder, or simply a chance to breathe a little slower, feel free to give the video a like or subscribe. Not as a task, but as a way of keeping this quiet corner of curiosity alive, a way of helping the sleepy explorer drift a little further across the digital night, finding others who might need its company too. For now, may the moon keep its watch over you as you rest. May its mystery soften your thoughts, and may its light remind you that even in the vastness, you are not alone. Sleep well and dream gently under the same silver glow that has watched over us all.